Well, thank you very much for the invitation, Dolly. I hope I'm coming through fairly clearly. I am behind the Great Firewall of China, which means that my internet connection goes from 100 megabit per second internally in China to about 0.1 with any kind of external connections going through VPNs. It's interesting to hear the presentations that everybody here has made, particularly those who hold roles and responsibilities at the COO level and have responsibilities for running organizations. I wanted to address a little bit about the psychological aspects of this COVID-19 phenomenon as it has occurred in China, seen some of the impacts around the world. We actually became aware that there was a problem within our community back in January, and actually some early indications very early in January. But officially, where we had to start responding, it didn't really occur until about the 20th of January. My family and I had gone on, just began the holiday for the Lunar New Year, which meant that we had abandoned Wuhan. We had driven out of the city. We kept going about 6 hours to drive south, looking forward to spending a couple weeks visiting relatives and friends in the south of China. Once the information started coming out that the government was considering shutting down Wuhan, shutting down Hubei province, and affecting anywhere from 11 to 15 million people, we had to make some decisions in order to turn around, go back home, and start adapting to the new reality that we all had to face. China is much, much different than the societies you function in. China is a command-driven economy to a great extent, so there's a great entrepreneurial drive that exists within. The government was able to impose a very strict quarantine measure within Wuhan and then spread out to Hubei province, and then eventually through the rest of China within days. Literally within a few weeks, we had gone from fairly easy mobility, and in fact, a great exodus that occurs during that Lunar New Year holiday, into a lockdown situation that continues to this date. You may hear some news about China's open for business and how various factories are now functioning at 90 or 90% or better. But in fact, that's not really the reality. What is happening is that you have regional openings that are in areas that have manifested a great incident, but certain areas have continued to be under fairly strict quarantine. For example, I am under quarantine right now. I have been in lockdown since January 23rd. If I want to leave my residential compound, I require to get a daily health certificate. My temperature is checked about, I would say about every time I pass through a gate or an entrance, whether it's to a residential area or to a store or to a business, there's monitoring on a consistent basis. China is a surveillance society. There are cameras in place in all major cities. If you make any kind of physical movement through the city, it is being recorded. One of the things that we've seen occurring here, and it's a business opportunity if you take a look at crisis offering some opportunities. The government here, in conjunction with major technology firms like Tencent, Alibaba, and others, has instituted a way of tracking not only your physical location through GPS on a personal cell phone, but also through voluntary compliance through an application that you self-disclose your health status and then your relationship with anybody who might have been exposed to the virus. And then as you move around, there are various barcodes in place throughout the city where you scan your phone that gives the government an opportunity to see the movement of individuals and then do a vector backtrace in order to locate, if they identify somebody with the virus, they can backtrack and find out who was sitting in the same rail car as you were, or metro or bus, or in a store, or passing through a particular entrance or a residential compound. That's a form of surveillance, an imposition of surveillance that exists nowhere else in the world right now, to my best knowledge. It has both a positive impact in that we are able to track infection vectors, but it also bodes very poorly for any kind of personal freedom going forward in China. This is an experimental approach that can very well be leveraged into political surveillance or criminal surveillance, which is what has been a typical application in the past. Camera technologies are fantastically advanced, and also video streams with recording capabilities is another aspect that this enforced quarantine has brought to the forefront, both as a business opportunity, but also as a societal control mechanism. The regional impacts, I guess when I hear the presentations that were just made, there's an assumption that there's some homogeneous impact through a country as large and diverse as China, and that's just not the case. Hubei province, where Wuhan is based, was the locus for the early infection streams, and also continues to be of great concern that has not been fully arrested. We show no public information at this point of continued infection rates. Any infections that are reported are claimed to be coming from outside vectors, not from within Wuhan, but imported from foreign travelers, from some sort of a mobility aspect rather than local manifestation. Beijing, as the national capital, as a political capital, is on lockdown. You have very little personal ability to move about without great controls, and part of it is they want to protect the government. The other side of things, you go to Shanghai, or you go to Chongqing, or you go to any of the other large megacities, and we're talking there 15 million plus population centers, you have a greater mobility. Hong Kong is basically isolated from mainland China. You still have an ability to cross over, but only with very special permissions. It is a completely different situation that we're experiencing here. How does that affect you on a business level? Okay, a lot of individuals use China as a manufacturing base. It has had low labor costs. It's had a very quick turnaround in prototyping, moving into the manufacturing and into your supply chain. That still exists. You can still go to China and you will find ready acceptance of any business you're willing to throw there, but you have to be a little bit cautious in terms of the ability of companies to deliver. The actual manufacturing chains that are in place right now are dependent on sub-manufacturing. It is very difficult right now in many areas of the country to get labor to actually come to work. In Wuhan, and I'll speak about Wuhan since I'm resident here and I actually go out daily to see what the activity levels are, as well as monitoring all of the business units.
I'm sorry, Peter, if I may interrupt you here, if I can ask you to speak for more, not more than 5 minutes, because we've arranged to stop at 6. Yeah, wonderful. It's very interesting. Keep on telling, just to have a frame. Thank you.
Yes. So one of the things that you should be considering, if you use China as part of your supply chain, whether it's sub-assemblies or complete assemblies, R&D, design, and the like, China is open for business. It's very easy to come in here, and you'll find low bids, and you'll have very responsive management. However, you have to do a lot more due diligence than you had to do maybe 2 months ago, because the firms themselves are not up to speed at this moment. There's a labor shortage. There's also difficulty sometimes in transportation of raw materials. There is actually, and I was hoping to spend a little bit of time on psychology, but there is a fear within the population and within the business community, as well as the governmental agencies, that this is not a controlled environment at this point. We still like a flattening of the curve. I've heard that thrown around quite a bit. That's dependent on official numbers, not on verified numbers. World Health Organization numbers are based solely on China reporting to the World Health Organization with no independent verification. The population within China, and the business community in particular, and not just the expatriate community, but actually the people who are functioning in the banking systems and other critical uncertainty. Therefore, there's not a great amount of capital flow right now. Nobody knows where to put the money. Nobody knows exactly how they're going to leverage the availability of firms to actually produce what is being contracted. You may have a paper in hand. You may have foreign contracts. The Chinese government offered force majeure clauses on everything that was going outside of the country. The country at this point officially sent out a number of these force majeure letters that basically alleviated any obligations to deliver on contractual terms. So this is, again, something that needs to be kind of ironed out within the legal system. And I can go into that more detail, but not with the amount of time available for that. Psychologically, I just want to caution all of you as business managers, as directors of large enterprise, is that you have to be very, very cautious. I'm glad I think Tomas had actually brought up the point of being very aware of the psychological status of your employees, possibly your suppliers' employees, and go as far down that supply chain an impact where people will be hesitant to go to work, right? Where you may have to incentivize them. Right now, Wuhan and Hubei province is incentivizing 1 million young student potential employees. They can't go to school, right? The universities and schools are still in shutdown, but they're encouraging them to go in and join the labor force temporarily or even long-term if it turns out to be that way. So there's a lot of adaptations that will be occurring, especially in countries that have more of an authoritarian governmental approach, as opposed to what you are facing at this point, where you have some freedom to go ahead and make some economic decisions, to make some business decisions. It's not necessarily the case here.